We are live. Okay. Oh, Senator Chittenden has joined us on the. All right. If we can get back to course. What that was. We are back and this is Wednesday and we are H 898, an act relating to copper-based to fiber-based telecommunications network transitions and consumer protection. Okay.
I didn't realize it was so long until you just said it.
How long is the bill?
Not that long.
I thought maybe not, so
Where's my
let's get that one.
Okay, let me pull that up. So the H 898.
Fiber-based telephone service. All right. So that's making a little more sense. Okay. That's in the bill, it wasn't on the agenda.
Okay. So, Maria Royal with Legislative Council. And that's the act Carlo suggests. This has to do with telephone companies that are transitioning their old legacy copper networks to fiber-based networks. And what this bill contemplates. And we'll go through the findings, which I think helps clarify the issues, but basically ensuring that customers receive notice as well as information about the types of service available, what their rights are with the new service for the transition, and other kind of safeguards regarding the new service. So
Would the issue on this be, I have a copper line. The line goes by my house. Once that line goes to fiber, I'm going to get. Don't it cost to me to string the new fiber line to my house?
I don't think it's something about the cost. I think if it's, if it's the legacy provider, they're gonna upgrade the network, so they would pay for that upgrade.
Okay.
So I don't think the customers would be on the hook for any of those costs.
Okay, because I know they are when I string telecommunications,
Yeah,
internet.
Yep.
All right.
yep. So we'll just go through, like I said, the findings kind of explain some of the issues. So the General Assembly finds that when a telecommunications carrier transitions its infrastructure from a copper-based network to a fiber-based network, it is critical to ensure that existing customers have continued access to high-quality, reliable telecommunications service. So once you go to fiber, your voice service will be voice service, voice over internet protocol.
Okay.
So the transition to VoIP service over fiber network may affect service reliability, consumer choices, and access to emergency services, particularly for vulnerable populations, including older adults and those with medical dependencies. And in part, what that is getting at, some people have devices, medical devices that operate over a copper network, and just ensuring that they understand other devices might be available, make sure that they work, so on. 3, unlike traditional service over a self-powered or line-powered copper-based network, otherwise known as plain old telephone service or POTS, a fiber-based service relies upon an optical network terminal which must be connected to a power source or outlet at a customer's home or business in order to be operational. So when you lose power, unless you have battery backup, you will not be able to access the internet, make telephone calls over the internet. So, and that's explained in finding 4.
Dealt with the,
Yes, you've definitely dealt with this issue.
yes,
Um,
we have.
So in the event of a power outage, most backup batteries connected to the optical network terminal will provide VoIP service for up to 8 hours. However, backup power systems that provide service for a longer duration are also available. And then 5, previously, federal regulations have required providers of facilities-based fixed residential voice services, so companies that own their own infrastructure, lines to a residence, that are not line powered, such as VoIP service, to offer for sale at least one option with 8 hours of standby backup power, as well as additional 24-hour option to ensure customer equipment maintain E911 access during a power outage. However, those federal requirements were sunset by operation of law on September 1st, 2025. 6, finally, there is a need for clear customer safeguards to ensure continuous and reliable service during the transition to and in the provision of VoIP service, and for enhanced state oversight of customer access to emergency services generally. So it is the intent of the General Assembly to balance telephone network modernization with customer safeguards during the copper to fiber network transition, and to enhance state oversight with regard to ensuring that all telephone customers have continuous and reliable access to emergency services. So the definition of VoIP is there. It's a pretty standard definition. Interconnected service, a service that can access the telephone and numbering system, make calls. Facilities based again, so this would be a provider that owns the infrastructure. Fixed is to a particular location, can be wired or wireless, and specifies that this applies to residential voice service. So the part of the bill is in subsection B, and these are the notice requirements. So a telecom carrier proposing a transition its network in its service territory shall provide written notice by U.S. first class mail and email to the Commissioner of Public Service, the E911 board, and all affected customers at least 120 days, 60 days, and 30 days prior to the planned transition. And then what is included in that notice: 1, the date the transition is expected to occur, the details of service changes, including any potential impact on the customer's telephone service, and whether the carrier will offer a reasonably comparable replacement service in relation to pricing terms and conditions. 3, information sufficient to inform customers about the need to test and verify any auxiliary telecommunications devices, such as alarm systems and medical alert devices, to ensure they function properly over the new system service. 4, disclosures about whether the carrier is obligated to provide regulated landline voice service to residential customers in the service territory. 5, information on the need for and availability of backup power options and battery backup devices to maintain service continuity during a power outage. And then a link to the PUC's consumer protection rules related to billing, credit collections, etc., which also has a consumer bill of rights as part of that rule, or how to obtain a hard copy of the rule if a customer would like that. And then 7, contact information for customer support with the carrier, and also for the Division of Consumer Affairs and Public Information that's within the Department of Public Service. Information regarding the availability of and eligibility for any federal, state, or carrier discount programs applicable to the replacement VoIP service. And then a catch-all, any other disclosures deemed necessary and appropriate by the Commissioner. to ensure the public convenience and necessity, to ensure that the public convenience and necessity will not be adversely affected by the transition or discontinuance of service. So that's kind of the bulk of the consumer protection, the notice that needs to be sent to all of the customers. And then in terms of kind of ongoing oversight of VoIP service generally, subsection E requires that beginning on or before November 1st of this year and annually thereafter, each VoIP service provider shall file a report with the department detailing the number of customers who have purchased battery backup systems from the carrier, if they offer it, how many have purchased from the carrier. And in that case, include the purchase and installation costs, if applicable, and documenting any known incidents where 911 access was impaired or interrupted due to the lack of backup power. So if they know, then they would have to compile and report that information. Enforce, this is just a subsection F is an enforcement subsection, and basically says if a carrier violates any provision of this section, it would be subject to the department's general penalty provisions under section 30 of Title 30, and its authority to impose injunctions under section 209. And then in addition to receiving these reports, the department would also shall review quarterly the outage reports that are submitted to the 911 board. This rule requiring these reports applies to both telecom companies and the power companies, the electric utilities. And what if an outage meets certain thresholds, like for a certain period of time, or a certain area, then they're required to report that information to the 911 board. So the department would be looking at all of that data, as well as the department's own telecom service availability data and any other relevant data available to the commissioner, to determine if there are areas of the state particularly prone to carrier or power outages, and assess whether locations in those areas may be vulnerable to extended periods of time without access to 911 service. So just kind of monitoring of the market. And then in addition, the commissioner, in coordination with the Office of the Attorney General, shall establish a mechanism for receiving and tracking any consumer complaints concerning VoIP service quality and reliability. There is a requirement for education, consumer education and outreach that the commissioner will develop. And it should be designed to ensure that all customers impacted by the transition from copper to fiber are aware of their rights and the carrier's obligations during the transition. And all customers who use VoIP service are aware of the risks and best practices concerning emergency preparedness in the event of a power outage. Then the department, in its annual report to the General Assembly, shall include findings and recommendations related to the implementation and enforcement of this section. And then in next year's report only, the commissioner shall consider and make recommendations on, one, whether the state should establish a program designed to provide financial assistance to customers with low income for costs associated with the purchase and installation of backup power equipment. And two, whether the state should enact additional backup power obligations applicable to VoIP service providers. And so this act would take effect on passage and would apply to all telecom carriers on September 1st, 2026.
Okay,
So
I'm having flashbacks of this. We had a whole town that was out from wheat and batteries weren't available in any store, and Yeah. It got to be very contentious. But as we make the transition to VoIP, which I think we can now say is inevitable, and it's going to happen. We do need, I mean, trees come down on power and phone lines, then you get cut off. This is Vermont. It snows. But people should at least know the potential is here. And they should know about, we need to check the batteries in there and have backups. Or other backups, especially if you have medical equipment of some kind that goes, all right. So hopefully, we should probably hear from the 911 on this.
So the way I understand it, Maria, is that fiber provider, they do have to offer a battery backup plan.
I don't think they have to anymore. It was required
Yeah,
under federal rules,
okay,
but those provisions sunset September.
okay, that's the part that sunsets.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that was part of, next year, asking the department, the commissioner to look at whether there should be additional requirements, perhaps similar to what was required under.
So is that a federal sunset?
That was, it was,
Federal
yeah,
sunset.
yeah, by operation of federal law, they had.
So,
to sunset.
Yeah, I mean, this is FCC, can we require, we can?
Yeah.
Okay.
The state retains pretty broad consumer protection
Okay,
authority over interstate services. You're raising an issue that I should probably mention what's happening at the federal level with respect to copper retirement, discontinuing
Yeah.
service. There was a recent FCC order this month having to do with modernization of services and states' retirements. Because the carriers are required to file an application with the FCC and there's a review period. So much of the requirements have been streamlined. If you submit certain information, then you get an automatically, you're granted authority to go ahead and do the transition. The issue that's drawing a lot of concern is there's also a preemption provision in the rule, basically stating that any state law that is in conflict, so the FCC says, yes, you may you may discontinue the service, assuming there's a replacement service available, or transition to a VoIP service. There's a conflict with the state fighting or rule, and that's preempted. What's a little bit unclear under the FCC's rule is one of the things they do is they basically define all voice service as jurisdictionally mixed. So not just intrastate or interstate, right? Because the FCC has authority for interstate communications. The states have authority for intrastate, which made a lot more sense in 1934. Nonetheless,
When it was long distance.
right. But still, that kind of cooperative federalism of this partnership and joint authority has continued. By defining voice service as jurisdictionally mixed, their argument is we have authority where it is mixed because it's impossible to comply with both the federal rules and state rules. I don't know that they actually can do that, have the authority to do that. That would be a big change, and it seems to undermine the whole system of, the dual jurisdiction.
That was the ruling this month?
The rule just came out that, yes, basically,
Yeah.
preempting state authority to make decisions that are in conflict with it. I should also mention that providers have to notify and petition the PUC to discontinue service. Sorry, I should have said that first. So if the PUC were to say, you need to continue to provide service, or you know, the PUC may agree that the service, the networks still need to be maintained in this instance, or they may find that there are reasons for not granting the petition. But in any event, you should kind of be aware of what's happening.
Okay.
And as you know, some of the providers, the incumbent local exchange carriers, do have carrier of last resort obligations to provide all customers in their service areas with service if requested. So I think that's going to be a big issue, just making sure that those providers get authority by the FCC. That would be a big change in Vermont if they were suddenly relieved. And so I don't think that they are relieved from that, but it is something that's being debated.
Interesting.
Okay.
So if you want to hear from the PUC or the department about their authority to continue oversight and the extent of that, or that could be helpful.
No, I think we will definitely hear from the PUC and PSB, yeah. We'll just have a utilities day here.
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions?
Okay. And we're moving on to page 753. And this is an act relating to utility service disconnections and ratepayer protections.
And this is the House version of a bill that we had in here,
Okay.
I think.
Yeah.
That we shortened to.
Yes.
Okay,
This was Senator White's bill.
yes,
Yeah.
okay, because yes, I know there is that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew this was coming.
Okay, so what this does is shall be cited as a Vermont Energy Equity Law, but basically section 2, well, I'll just read it, it's not that long. For the purpose of providing policymakers with the data necessary for monitoring and responding to trends in the residential, electric, and gas sectors, particularly with respect to safeguarding and welfare of ratepayers, Commissioner of Public Service shall conduct an annual assessment of involuntary residential service disconnections. The assessment shall take into consideration the monthly disconnection reports that are prepared by electric and gas utilities pursuant to PUC rule. Just to let you know what they're required to report under the rules. They need to include a statement reporting the following information for the previous month. So these are monthly reports: the number of bills forwarded to customers, the number of disconnection notices sent, the number of actual disconnections, the number of reconnections made within 15 days of disconnection, the number of repayment plans entered into, the number of repayment plans that were broken, and the dollar amount of delinquencies for which disconnections were made. So that's reported monthly. So Commissioner will review that information as well as relevant consumer assistance records maintained by its own Consumer Affairs and Public Information Division, and any other data deemed appropriate by the Commissioner. And then report findings and recommendations. The assessment on disconnections to the Standing Committee's jurisdiction on or before January 15th of 2027. So again, just trying to get a better understanding of trends related to disconnections and so on. Then, going forward, section 3 specifies that on or before January 1st, 2028, or upon the initiation of any rulemaking pertaining to PUC, the disconnection rule pertaining to utilities, whichever occurs first, the PUC shall adopt rules that, 1, curtail electric utility service disconnections during periods of extreme heat, as defined by the commission, which may include a lower temperature threshold for households comprising persons who are 62 years of age or older, which is similar to the winter disconnection requirements. And 2, clarify that under the rule, the provision that allows you, customer to obtain a certification from a physician saying that there's a health hazard in the event if there were to be a disconnection, and therefore keep the service going for a period of time. I believe it's 30 months that can be renewed for an additional 30 months. But only 2 months continuously, 3 months for the whole year, but that's the limit. So anyway, this is just saying that a licensed physician assistant or a nurse practitioner may issue that certificate. And in addition, related to the time period, number 3, require due consideration of medical judgment regarding the duration of a health hazard indicated in a physician's certificate when establishing the disconnection protection period for a health hazard. So it makes sense to have a longer period of time. And that should be considered and adopted in rules.
Just a question. So is that requirement on a case by case basis or just overall that?
Doesn't really say. So I can almost see it in the way this reads. Due consideration of medical judgment, but maybe it is a case by case basis. I don't know exactly though how the PUC would. Maybe they would want to put into rule to reflect the recommendation of a provider. So maybe require that in the certificate there is, or something along that lines. And then.
Okay. It seems like depending on the circumstances for an individual, it may require a longer period than others.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
Yeah, you're on oxygen. Yeah, cease to be oxygen.
Yeah.
After X number of days. And we did have the utilities in when we looked at our bill, but we'll have them back in if they'd like to comment on this one. We'll make sure we get the independent small utilities in. And we should have the public service of PUC be the best place to talk about. Right now, it's the provider of last resort, which is
For the telecom.
which is been traditionally the landlines. As we go to fiber, because we had that issue with cell phones that don't have to do, there's a charge. And would that be the PUC, the Public Service Board?
Yep. The PUC and the Department
Okay.
of Public Service. They both testify in-house energy. Yeah.
And have them come in and talk to us about the provider of last resort and how that will fit in here.
Yeah.
Making sure that people do get emergency service. Okay, yes, and the impact any of this might have on fees and taxes, that would be both of them. Too, I think, are the tax department. Cause there's a landline, right? What do we,
Oh, you're talking about the universal.
service charge
Oh, well, that would still apply because that's on all
on all. Okay,
telecommunications service.
so that,
So doesn't matter whether you're a carrier package or every telephone bill.
okay, other questions, committee? No. Thank you. All right. We'll take testimony if they'd like from the people we had testimony on our bill. This one is slightly different. 898. We'll hear from phone companies. Comcast, the big players, Franklin, and I don't. Franklin Telephone has been one we've heard from in here. They're small, independent, and yeah, they're based in Franklin, and we should have contacts of them in there. You're the contact. Oh, yeah,
Local telephone provider?
they're a local telephone
Really?
provider. Yeah. And they have been going, we heard from them, they were down to like their last 10 miles and there was one house up
Yeah.
the road. And I'm thinking they may have done that. It was a couple of years ago.
Mm.
But no, it is a family owned local telephone provider.
There probably used to be thousands of them.
Yeah,
You know.
I think there were just one down around Rygate, maybe. And that may
There's Jonathan Wolf,
Yeah.
River Piper on behalf of the smaller ilex. There's about 8 of them now that are left around that are considered,
Okay.
the smaller ilex. Franklin is probably the smallest of them.
Yeah,
And also you think about Waitsfield, Champlain, Telecom, they're smaller.
yeah,
ilex.
but they're
But they're
they're
a lot,
big.
yeah, they're a lot bigger now. But
Yeah.
there's several smaller ones. But Franklin would be more than happy to.
Franklin was first providing
Okay.
fiber.
Yeah,
And
they're
Vermont.
almost, Franklin, I would say is about 95,
Yeah.
98%, it's literally one or two spots.
Is there one?
George Nishi was
There is-
worse.
I-
Waitsfield.
That area.
But
It's,
they got so
Um,
big, we included them in when we were doing the whole CUD.
oh, wait,
Yeah, Waitsfield, once,
Yeah,
they were small until they merged with Champlain and they got to be bigger compared to Frank,
compared
but
to.
they are still,
Yeah, it's.
but they're not
it's-
Comcast or, yeah,
Telephone.
Thompson?
that's the one I was
That's the one.
thinking of was
Yeah.
Thompson.
Yeah. So there's about 8 of them in the state, so
Okay,
they have all carrier of last resort obligations, they're happy to.
Okay, so you can get some names to Charlotte, we'll definitely hear from them and we will hear from the big guys. It takes some big guys. I just keep expecting our citizen advocate to come through the door, but he hasn't been seen this year. He was a regular in.
I haven't seen it at all.
I saw him in here once, probably about 2 weeks ago, and that's it.
I mean,
In this
he
building?
was a regular, and we should on, yeah. 898, we should hear from the, 911 board. But they were actively involved in this has to do with connection of the E911, so we will hear from them. Okay. I think that's it. If you think of anybody else you'd like to hear from, let me and Charlotte know. Fourth,
You done?
we are done.